I think our biggest concern was having open heart surgery. You know, I mean, that just the sound of it is scary.
Now imagine heart surgery with the help of a robot, the technique that's not offered everywhere, and it had this patient recovering at home just days later. That's coming up on All Things Heart.
From the University of Kansas Health System.
I am amazed. The team here is great.
I came on a Tuesday, and then by Saturday I had a heart in me.
I have never seen a group of people work together so good as this team of heart specialists. I mean, it's just unreal.
Stand by to set up show.
And the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio.
Roll.
Always makes you feel like you're the most important patient on the planet.
I felt heard, and that was really big.
This is All Things Heart.
Good morning, I'm Alexis Del Cid, and welcome back to All Things Heart. For our next guest and patient, the most surprising aspect of everything that happened, he says he had no symptoms alerting him that something was wrong. Yet he wound up needing heart surgery, and he wound up having it here at the University of Kansas Health System because one of our surgeons had an innovative way to perform that surgery. He would use a robot. Plus, about that surgeon, he's apparently a man of many talents. We're going to find out more about his unique upbringing and everything else he can do outside the health system. And of course, your questions and comments are the heartbeat of every episode, so please send them in to us. All the information on how you can connect with us is right there on your screen. So imagine this. Imagine a doctor tells you you need heart surgery. Those words can bring up some pretty heavy-duty feelings. Then your surgeon tells you he wants to use a robot to help do it. Christina Medina has the story of a patient who said, let's do it. And it turned out his surgery went better than he ever could have hoped.
Stuart Steffen is a retired Air Force pilot.
Graduated and went to fly B-52s. And for a high-altitude bomber, we didn't fly high altitude. It was always 200 or 300 feet above the ground. That was an awesome experience.
The former pilot is now celebrating nearly 4 decades of marriage.
I was the cashier, and they called him to the front to help, and I thought he was super cute. And we started talking. We went on break, and then we've now been married 37 years.
This past year, however, has not been as blissful as his early career and growing family. Stuart's heart was in trouble.
Well, the valve was compromised in a couple of ways. It was very weak.
Doctors had been monitoring Stuart's heart for the last 11 years after they heard a murmur.
That's it. There were no symptoms. In fact, you know, for me, all the way up to surgery, I was fairly asymptomatic.
But doctors said it was time. He needed surgery.
I think our biggest concern was having open heart surgery. You know, I mean, that just the sound of it is scary.
But there was an alternative. Doctors explained the University of Kansas Health System was a leader in minimally invasive robotic surgery.
Dr. Dayon had just an incredibly calming presence. I think there was a lot of comfort in knowing that we could stay local.
With robotic surgery, surgeons have an enhanced 3D view with the ability to zoom in and magnify up to 12 times the normal size. Tiny incisions are all that is needed.
There's 2 for the arms, obviously, that they go in and manipulate, and then there's a camera hole.
The robotic arms allow flexibility and precision while minimizing recovery time.
His recovery time, like I said, was half of what it is when they have to open the sternum.
The post-operative cardiologist praised the surgery and told Stuart the valve should last him the rest of his days.
I have nothing but good things to say. It just went smoothly. I'd do it again. No, I won't.
We are so pleased to welcome Stuart Steffen and his lovely wife Valerie to today's program. You look fabulous, both of you, along with his cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Emmanuel Dayon. Thank you all for taking time to join us. I want to start with Stuart. How are you feeling today?
As far as my heart, great. I'm not sure about the rest of my body, but no, I feel good.
How quickly after surgery were you home? You said just a few days?
I went in on Thursday and was home Saturday or Sunday morning. Yeah, and for me, I could have left. I could have left Friday morning. It just, for me, it went that smoothly.
Valerie, how quickly did you notice that he was back to his old self? Was it a little nerve-wracking to have him home so quickly?
It was. Like you said, he thought he could come home on Friday. Probably wasn't quite ready on Friday, but he was so surprised at how well he did feel considering the procedure. And, you know, I could hear the murmur or I could hear the murmur when I was laying on his chest, and after the surgery, that I don't hear it beat at all. I mean, I hear it beat, but I don't hear that murmur.
It sounds the same as it should sound. I want to ask Dr. Deon, when people hear about a robot helping with surgery, you know, for those of us outside of the medical profession, you might picture C-3PO. You picture a robot, right? But let's take a look at what this robot actually looks like. We have some video of you and the robot working on another patient. Can you explain to us a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. So this robot is not a robot where you push a button and everything happens by itself. It's actually technology that was developed by NASA to work on the space shuttle without the astronauts going outside the confines of the shuttle. And it really didn't work that well for that purpose because the scale was too large. And the company bought the intellectual property and developed this robot for surgery, which is really perfect for working in a small space, like inside the heart or inside the abdomen, for example. So there's a patient bedside cart that has the arms connected, and then there's a console where I sit. That's about 20 to 25 feet away, and I control the instruments that are hooked up to the arms of the patient cart with little joysticks, just like a video game.
Wow. So that's you in that console kind of looking in? That's what you do?
Yes.
How do you train for that? Do you practice? I mean, obviously you practice, but how do you practice to get the hang of using the controls and stuff?
So one of my passions and what brought me to KU 15 years ago was I wanted to develop a training program or a residency program for cardiothoracic surgery. And that was one of my passions, aside from robotic surgery. And one of the great things that this technology has allowed us to do is really to mimic real life situation, but without real life patients. And so simulation has become an enormous part of medical and surgical training. And there are all sorts of algorithms that start very basic to start on inanimate objects, putting rings on pegs, for example. And then the rest of it, as you progress, simulating operations that look just like the real thing. Maybe operating a needle on the needle driver, and the machine makes you drop the needle, and you have to go and pick it up. That's just one quick example of how things work, and people can progress to train on this. But it takes several years to get to that point. And
how common is it?
It's a process.
How common is it to perform heart surgery this way?
It is, I would say in every large city in the U.S., you would find a surgeon who does robotic cardiac surgery. We do either 1 or 2 cardiac robotic surgeries per week at KU, which is kind of a lot. Mitral valve leakage is not a very common problem, but it's common enough that we see a lot of patients. And once referral patterns become established, it really concentrates our experience so that we get better and better at fixing the valve.
Stuart, how did you discover that this was an option for you?
I probably 5 years ago, I started I knew things were progressing. And so I started looking around, and I found actually I knew KU had a great heart program. My son had worked there in the past, and I found Dr. Deon's video talking about the robotic surgery, and I threw this out there to him, my son, our son, and he said, yeah, it's worth a consult. And so I just kept that in the back of my mind. And but I also had a cardiologist at the time that told me that don't even bother with the robotic way of doing things, just have it done the old-fashioned way and go about your business. Well, I mean, I was running from having a sternotomy as fast as I could for as long as I could. And but once we had to decide on somebody to do the surgery, it just all it came back to Dr. Dayon, and I was told I was opted for it, and I took it in a heartbeat, not knowing necessarily whether it was better than the sternotomy or not.
But you had another surgeon at another hospital who said don't do it, and then you find Dr. Dayon's video, and turns out to be a great option.
It was actually the
cardiologist. And then what is it about this method, Dr. Dayon, that allowed Stuart to be home so quickly?
So the probably the most significant thing about robotic approaches is that it avoids opening the sternum for cardiac surgery. And the sternum is a bone just like any other bone. And if, for example, you break your femur, it will take you a couple of months to heal at the minimum. And the sternum is no different. It would take about 2 months to 3 months to get back to normal without having that bone opened up or broken, and just using small incisions that fit, that allow the instruments to fit in between ribs. In other words, you don't break any ribs or cut any muscles. The recovery is much quicker. And it is quicker in the hospital, maybe 3 to 4 days versus 6 or 7 days. And that may not seem like a huge difference to most people, but I find that the most significant difference is that the return to normal life is, 3 to 4 weeks versus 3 to 4 months. And that's a big difference for most people who have mitral valve leakage, which happens to be a problem in patients who are, let's say, 45 to 65 years old. So they're still very active.
Yeah, and Stuart's an active guy. I mean, we could see, and he's got this wife that adores him, Valerie. Clearly, they have so many more things they want to do. Valerie, that must have been, what was going through your mind when Stuart said, hey, I think I want to have a surgery with a doctor and a robot?
I think the first thing is when we decided we were going to go talk to him, we also took our son, who is the cardiology nurse practitioner, there too, kind of for his 2 cents. But when we walked out of that room, all 3 of us looked at each other and we're like, this is it. And again, credit to Dr. Dayon. I mean, his demeanor, his delivery, and his confidence was just so reassuring that I think we all immediately knew that this is what would fit him best.
Absolutely.
And so, go on.
I was going to say absolutely. I mean, we didn't even look at each other when we walked out of his office. We just all mumbled under our breath, "This is the guy. This is the guy. This is the guy."
Yeah.
And we didn't look back. It was an easy decision.
Boy, that's pretty cool to hear, Dr. Dayon.
It is. I think one of the other things that robotic cardiac surgery highlights is, it's really hard to, I would imagine, would be really hard to sign up for a major surgery that involves your heart if you feel pretty good. And just thinking about, the minimized effect of the recovery because of the robotic approach, and the valve is repaired the same way, whether we do it open or robotically. It is so important to do this at the right time for the patient. And the fact that Mr. Steffens recovered so quickly is a testament that we did this at the right time. If we had waited until he had become symptomatic, it would have taken a much harder toll on him. Not because the surgery is any different, but because he would have been further down the road with mitral valve leakage for a longer time and maybe damage to his heart. So I feel like that's a real plus in giving patients a little bit more confidence to say, okay, we have the data, we understand why this is happening, and now we understand why we need to fix it, and it may not be quite as hard to recover and maybe a little bit less risky. So those are the main benefits, and I really feel like that makes a big difference.
We have some images that you've shared with us, Dr. Dayon, to help explain exactly what you did to Stuart's heart, what was wrong with his heart, and you call a mitral valve repair. So when we pull up these images, what are we looking at here?
So the mitral valve is a one-way valve inside the heart that only allows blood to flow one direction. And it has 2 flaps, a front flap and a back flap, or anterior and a posterior leaflet. And most patients, like Mr. Steffen, have what we think is a wear and tear problem, and also partly a connective tissue problem that affects the mitral valve leaflet. And you can see in the upper right corner, the middle portion of the posterior leaflet is really all stretched out and has a couple of broken cords that normally help to suspend the valve to the ventricle. or the pumping chamber of the heart. So we repair that by removing what is stretched out, and we suture the healthy parts of the valve back together, and then we stabilize the repair with what's called an annuloplasty, which is basically a plastic band or a shape that returns the shape of the opening back to what it was supposed to be like originally, so the two flaps can really touch with one another, just like a door into a door jamb.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. I like that. So then as we talk about Stuart's heart, one of the most surprising things, I think, and alarming things, and this is Stuart Stephan's heart, Stuart says he wasn't feeling any symptoms or anything was wrong. So Stuart, how big of a shock was it to you that you needed heart surgery when you weren't feeling anything wrong?
Well, it's like Dr. Dan alluded to earlier. It's hard to accept that you have to go through the procedure when you don't feel like you should be going through the procedure. And
right.
But it, towards the end, probably the last year or two, I could feel that there was something different going on, and I knew that it was going on. It just, I tried to understand it physically, and I could tell that it was progressing to the point where it needed to be done. And of course, all the images that they took and all the peripheral medical stuff that they did, it showed that it was time. But for 8-10 years, I felt pretty good. I accepted it and lived with it pretty easily. And I think it was probably moderate at that point. But once it got to more of the severe, you could tell the difference.
So Dr. Dayan, what symptoms should people be watching for? Is it common to go through what Stuart went through, where for nearly a decade, he wasn't feeling anything was wrong?
It really is very common, and I'm glad actually that you mentioned this because this is very common, and I hear this all the time. The problem with mitral valve leakage is it reduces the forward flow through the normal arterial system in the body, and so in essence, your organs are not getting enough blood flow. So this is stealing from the circulation, and that includes your brain, your muscles, basically every organ in the body, and it is sneaky. It just very gradually begins to leak, and it leaks a little more, and then a little more. And all this time, because it is so gradual, it's really easy to minimize it and say, well, it couldn't be anything bad. I'm just slightly more tired. Maybe now I take a nap in the afternoon, whereas before I didn't. And I hear this all the time. And I will tell you, interestingly, men are a lot better at masking their symptoms than women. Women are much more honest about fessing up, and it's almost a constant that after surgery is done, and I see my patients back in clinic, that I hear things like, "My God, I didn't realize how bad I felt, and now I feel like I have my life back, I have energy back," and that's all because of forward flow in the circulation. So this is very common. The symptoms to watch out for are feeling tired, feeling short of breath, and those are not necessarily severe symptoms. And when you think of heart problems, I think most people automatically think, well, it couldn't be my heart. Otherwise, it would, the symptoms would be a lot more severe. But in fact, this is very sneaky.
I want to get to our community questions because we have several questions coming in from our viewers. So now is a great time for you to send them in. Jonas wants to know, can you use this type of surgical system on something other than your heart?
You can. Actually, the first organ system that Intuitive Surgical developed the machine to work on was the prostate, and it started back in the mid-90s. It really was developed and refined, and I think we're on the 5th generation of machines, and they are now doing surgery on other organs than the heart with a single port system. In other words, instead of 5 incisions, just using 1. And I'm sure at some point the technology will be advanced enough that we can use this on the heart as well. So many other organs. So for example, the prostate, the colon, the lung, the heart, the esophagus. So it's really very widespread.
Troy has a question, and you did touch on this, but I want to reiterate how much shorter the recovery time is. Troy asked, can you tell us again, what would Stuart's recovery time have been had you not used the robot and just done open heart surgery? That would have been cutting open his sternum, right?
Correct. So for open heart surgery, we actually open the sternum with a saw in the midline, and then we reapproximate or bring it back together with heavy steel wires at the end of the procedure. Our own data at KU, which is a little bit ahead of the national data, shows that we're dismissing people home from robotic surgery at about 3 or 4 days, a little bit under 4 days, and that they return to work 3 to 4 weeks after the surgery's been finished. In contrast, a normal or regular old-fashioned sternotomy patient would go back home probably 7 or 8 days, and then get back to their normal life at 3 to 4 months.
I've got a tandem question for you. Wendy wants to know more about the additional training you have to do to perform surgery like this, and then Ryan asked, is it something they're going to start training med school students with?
Training a medical
I don't know how well you know that.
To do regular heart surgery without the robot would be like a little bit like asking a toddler to run a marathon. It'd be really difficult. So there are many more steps in between that have to be accomplished. So our cardiothoracic surgery residents do train on the robot. They train on robotic procedures. And depending on their level of interest, they can develop the skills to be competent to do this independently at the end of their training. They spend 3 years with us after having spent 5 years in general surgery, and that's after 4 years of medical school and 4 years of college. So it takes quite a long time. And even after cardiothoracic surgery residency, the company that makes the machine requires every surgeon to be proctored for a few cases and then have a certificate of completion before you can operate independently.
Denise has a message for Stuart and Valerie. Denise writes, congratulations on almost 40 years of marriage. That's sweet. And then let's see, we have a question from Debbie. Debbie says, how do you know where to go if the hospital you're at doesn't offer this kind of surgery? How do you find someplace?
Online. That's the easiest answer I can give you. You can Google robotic mitral valve repair online, and you'll get about 1,000 hits. And hopefully, if you're in this region, KU and our program will pop up not too far down the list.
The University of Kansas Health System has one of these programs that not every hospital has this. Question for you from Corey. This is for Stuart. Corey wants to know, what's the biggest thing, Stuart, that you've noticed post-surgery?
Well, there's actually two of them. One was the pounding in my chest, the laboring of my heart prior to surgery. It was very noticeable to me. Just sitting around watching TV or standing in a circle talking to people. It was laboring, and it just felt like I needed to go, if I wasn't sitting down, go sit down, and I needed to rest, but it didn't go away, and so that was the first thing that immediately went away. The second thing was the longevity that I had with any kind of activity that I did. That was the ability to tolerate a longer time of whatever that is was noticeable after probably 4 to 6 months. There was a little bit of adjustment in the beginning, but now I could do whatever I need to do at whatever exertion level, and I stop and my heart recovers quickly. And before, it just continued to labor and labor and labor and labor. So those are the two, probably the main things that are different for me now. And I comment to her probably every day how great it feels to feel normal again. I didn't know what normal was anymore. I had the new norm, and now it's I'm remembering now how it used to feel, and it's a nice it's nice feeling.
And that's what Dr. Dayon said, and I want to bring everybody back in for some final thoughts, and I want to start with Valerie, because Valerie, you've had a front row seat to this that no spouse ever wants, seeing your husband go through something like this, but I can also see, as you smile and look at him, you've been beside him every way. It must feel such relief having now seen him come out of this on the other side.
Absolutely. We did worry because we knew he was, it was continually getting worse. And if he didn't answer his phone, I mean, we all panicked, he probably felt like he was being tracked, but I mean, it was like he had to keep his phone on him at all times. One time we couldn't get a hold of him and our son came over to check on him because we just worried all the time. And it is such a relief that to not worry like that anymore. He can put his phone down now.
Yeah, that must be nice. Stuart, what do you want our viewers to know about your experience?
Oh, I said that in the video. I tell everybody now that I would take this over a root canal any day. It just went that smoothly for me, and I don't know what the norm is. I didn't care what the norm was or the statistics. I just know for me, everywhere from the system at KU to Dr. Dayon himself, there was no negative. I can't find a negative at all. It just was and to be apprehensive to the level that you are typically to go through something like this. You're electing to walk in front of a bus versus, being hit by the bus, and now you're recuperating. It was it was a mental game as well. And had I known what I know now about the surgery, like I say, I would have done it. I know there's risk involved, but I would have probably chosen to do it earlier than what I did. I was probably opted for it for 3 or 4 years prior. But I can't say enough good. And Dr. Dayon, you were absolutely phenomenal. Great.
Oh, Dr. Dayon, that must feel pretty special to hear such glowing words from one of your former patients.
Well, it's really an honor for me to help patients like Mr. Stephan to get well. And, that's, for me, that's my paycheck. That's what I get out of my work and that's the reason that I went into it is to be able to help people, feel like they have their life back, because this is such a big change. And no, you're not just getting old. I mean, that's the message here. There is something to be fixed. And we need to spread the word and listen to our bodies. And so it's a real privilege, and it's even a greater privilege to help train other surgeons to do this.
Well, Dr. Dayon, one of the things that we love doing about this program is that we get to know our doctors on a more personal level, which is why we love showing our viewers this next segment.
Now for a secret look into the guardians of healthcare at the University of Kansas Health System. Let's go behind the mask.
This morning, we're going behind the mask, getting to know Dr. Dayon a little bit better, because you have a great life story. I want to start out in Colorado, though, because we have a picture of you and your wife. Tell us about your wife and where you are.
So my wife, Kate, and I have been married for almost 8 years, and I have always been an avid a lover of winter sports, skiing, snowboarding, skating, but I've never been to the mountains in the summertime. And she, on the other hand, has a lot of experience climbing 14,000-foot peaks. And so she introduced me to that, and we ended up falling in love partly because of a trip that we took to Colorado.
Oh, that's sweet. And you have 2 beautiful sons. You are also an athlete, as you've been talking about. You've done 2 Ironman races, and you play hockey, you're in a league, and you snowboard, and you ski. So tell us a little bit about the picture here of you playing hockey.
Well, so I want to make a side comment. I have completed 2 half Ironman races, which is a huge difference, half versus a full.
Wait, isn't 2 halves a full, though? Doesn't that count as a full,
well, no.
2 halves?
I wish.
I like my version better.
Okay, fine. I've always wanted to play hockey, but my mom would never let me because I was too small, and she was fearful I would get hurt. And so I finished my medical training, and after decades, I took lessons to learn to skate when I was about 35, and I've never stopped, and I play every week. I really enjoy it, and it's one of those things. I think hockey is a sport that you either love or you don't love, and I love it and would play every night if I could, but I can't.
You also sent us a picture, and what I like about this is you titled this right after an epic fail. So what happened to you right before this picture?
Well, this was a wonderful day. One of my friends and I were snowboarding in Park City, and it had snowed a lot the night before, and And I probably going a bit too fast, didn't see a bump, and ended up going literally head over heels and falling flat where he couldn't really even see me in the snow. And then I got up and he goes, "Hold off, I've got to take a picture of this. This is memorable."
And you were also born and raised in France. So you moved to the U.S. when you were how old?
I was almost 17 when my family moved to the United States. We moved to southern Louisiana, and this is where I completed most of my undergraduate studies. And then I came to Kansas City for a residency in general surgery and fell in love with the city and decided to put roots down, and I'm so glad I did.
Oh, we like to hear that. You know, at first I thought, gosh, this guy does so much, because you also play instruments and such, but you didn't want to send us videos of that. But you play the steel drum and the piano. So I'm working on getting those videos for our audience. So we'll get back with you on that. But since you do everything else, I suppose it makes perfect sense that you can also perform heart surgery with a robot.
Well, thanks. I grew up playing piano. My sons play. Actually, my family is pretty musical. My wife says she plays the radio better than anybody she knows. I love Jamaican music and reggae, and I found actually somebody who teaches steel drum here in Kansas City, who spent a couple of summers out in Trinidad, and so I ended up buying a steel drum and took lessons, and I dabble in it. I'm not really good, but I do better on the piano.
That's pretty cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time to join us this morning, among all the other things you're doing, including saving lives. And thank you to Stuart and Valerie for sharing your journey with us. And congratulations on almost 40 years of marriage. It's so wonderful to see you so happy. And thank you to our audience for joining the conversation this morning. Coming up next week on All Things Heart.
I literally felt like I was dying from the inside out.
What she thought was an old back injury turned out to be far more dangerous. Why half of her body wasn't getting the blood it needed, and the surgery to fix it, along with the talented surgeon who made it possible. That's next Thursday morning at 10 a.m.